with this piece, I think this can read differently to a lot of different people as well. You know, you just spoke that at the beginning. Some people think of this as a tragedy, and you guys look at it as a comedy, you know? So there's all these different subjective perspectives with Godot. So what themes in Godot did you use, or are you excited by to share with your audience?
So I'm going to answer maybe two of your questions in one question. So one of the greatest or biggest themes in Godot is isolation, right? It's this being alone, of being truly alone in the world, no matter what. You experience it with other people, but still your experience is individual. And so no one else is ever going to experience that as you do, right? And so it has this theme of isolation, right? This theme of I'm never going to truly going to connect to somebody else, and also, I mean, it seems like such a downer, but you know, the characters are waiting, right? They're waiting for Godot. And what is Godot? Who is Godot? You could go on and say, is, you know, Godot is God. You know, I think sometimes Godot is more than one thing. You know, Godot is death. Godot is hope. Godot is, you know, salvation, right? I think Godot represents a lot of different things, but it's this idea that we are alone in a meaningless universe trying to find meaning. And what happens if there really isn't a point? And what happens to your sense of self and your sense of purpose when you suddenly have that realization that maybe it really doesn't mean anything
Right.
at all.
Right.
Right. And then you're like, crap, it, you know, now what? Right. It has, the only meaning it has is the meaning that I put on it. Right. And also this idea that my life, I am only here. I only know that I am here if you reflect back to me that I am here, right? This idea of if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Well, you only know it makes a sound if somebody else says, yeah, it does, right? I was there. So there's that theme in Godot too, where there's this feeling of, am I asleep? Am I dreaming? Am I really here? Do I exist? Do you see me? Do you really see me?
Mm-hmm.
And if you do see me, then I have value, right? I am alive, you know? And more importantly than that, then I talk about this to my class, there's three things in our lives that we experience. The three biggest things in our lives that we experience, we have zero control over. When we're born, who we fall in love with, and when we die. The three most important things that will ever happen to you, you have no control over whatsoever, right? And so what does that mean? And this idea and the absurdist kind of thought that the only true thing that you really, really do have control over is your own death if you choose suicide, right? That's the only choice you ever get to make. Otherwise, you're just reacting to what's happening around you. You're only reacting. You're not acting, you're reacting. You're not determining, you're simply going along for the ride. And so it's that point of despair and yet freedom when you realize I am here, I think, but I am here because I want to be. I have a choice not to be. And so then, if I'm here because I want to be, what do I do with my time? And so in Godot, a lot of the things that happen that the characters do is fill up their time. What do we do to fill up our time? We eat, we sleep, we have sex, we read, we do plays, right? We exercise, you know, we talk, right? We do all of these things to fill up our time while we're waiting for some kind of revelation,
Right. It reminds me of Mary Oliver's poem, What are you going to do with this one great life? You know, that
Yeah,
permeates and comes through in so many themes.
yeah. And ultimately, I believe that the message of Godot, and what I teach my class, is the only thing that matters in all of it, in a meaningless universe, the only thing that's going to save you from this psychological hell, right? If you think about it too much, is this idea of compassion. That's your salvation. When you help another human being, when you have compassion towards another, that is the only thing that gives your life meaning. And I believe firmly that that is the true message. That is the the biggest theme in Godot.
The connection, which is so interesting going into COVID and
Right.
going into quarantining and removing yourself from the world and taking that time to understand who you are in that world, which, you know, it's funny as theater artists, you know, lots of times we'll do shows and when we're doing them, things happen in the world where we're like, oh my gosh, I mean, we just couldn't have even planned this.
Right.
And we see those themes probably heavier than a lot of other people do, but it's fascinating, you know,
Right.
especially with Waiting for Godot. We
Right.
continue to wait. We
Right. It's
continue
the
to wait for
perfect
COVID.
pandemic play.
Right.
It's perfect. Right. It's just the perfect pandemic play. It's, you know, because everybody had to stop. Right. Everybody had to stop all the distraction.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, now what? I'm bored out of my mind.
Right.
Right. Because yeah. But nobody wants to think about the big scary questions, right? Nobody wants to really, really start to contemplate, I'm not going to be here someday. And I don't know when that's going to happen, you know? And so like you just said, what am I going to do with the time that I do have here? Am I going to waste it away playing dominoes with my wife like I do every night? Or am I going to have a fascinating discussion about,
are you going to get back to directing this?
Right, what it means to be human. But I want Julia to jump in a little bit on this.
Well, and struggling through the themes was wonderful because we struggled a lot in the beginning. When we first did our read through, we talked a lot about what do we want to say with this play and what is the play saying itself. And I always come back to one of my favorite quotes and something that I live by. What is life without a purpose? What is purpose without love? And that's what Godot is. It's what's the point if we're not giving everything we have to the people around us or the people that we love doing or the things that we love doing and things like that. And especially during the pandemic, all of the Zoom rehearsals were hard because we wanted to connect. This is a play that you have to connect with your cast and your crew and the people that you're working with because it's so much to deal with sometimes because it's a weight that is, yeah. And we had a couple nights where we were just like, we have to stop talking about this because it's so much to think about as just one person. But when you get to share it with all of these other people, it's wonderful. And you're like, there's hope that we can get through it. And so we talked a lot about, okay, we have no idea what's going on with the pandemic. We're going to keep doing this. And we kept doing rehearsals for about 2 months, 3 months. And then we decided, you know, we can't continue something that we know isn't going to happen in the near future, but we can continue it when we're ready and when the world is ready for it. So it's about hope and it's about staying connected, especially during a time like this when it feels kind of hopeless.
I love that. And how you connect, right? We assume connection. I think prior to COVID too, taking a lot of things for granted of just being able to be in a room with other people and react off energy and you know, but I took a lot of things for granted. And Zoom rehearsals are really hard. And you guys did a great job. We tried to keep all 3 of those shows that we had in the wings because we didn't know when we would be able to perform, and we wanted to be ready, because that's a weird thing about theater as well, is that when you look forward to thinking, okay, when will there be a safe time? Then you have to have a show ready. So that's a whole other discussion of where we're at now, because we have taken a short break with our casts to even know how are we going to mount these shows, which we'll talk about in a minute. I want to get back though and ask you both. So did the theme, and let's just talk basically about the theme. Does the theme change because of the pandemic?
No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I got too. But I wanted to cover it.
I think it actually amplifies.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I think now an audience, because Godot can be hard for an audience sometimes to relate to, depending on how it's presented. I've seen, I mean, it can be deadly. I mean, it could be the most boring thing you've ever had to sit through in your life, like, right? Or it could be hysterically funny, and the time will pass like that. But I think what the pandemic will do for the audience is it will be more easily accessible. The experience of the waiting will be more easily accessible. The experience of the anxiety of the unknown will be more accessible. The experience of the one character, Pozo, who represents, I think, all of the negative aspects of human nature, will definitely be more accessible. And so I think the pandemic in that way will bring the play, I think people will get it more now than perhaps they would have before the pandemic. Yeah. But it doesn't change, I don't think, the play or the experience of the play, or what the play is searching for.
Because we all have this mutual experience now, mm-hmm. where we've had to all do the waiting and the isolation and the not being able to connect with people, and how did we handle that? And I think that when audiences see it, they're going to see themselves in Dee Dee and Go-Go a lot more than they would without having to go through this pandemic.
We're all in the universal waiting room.
Right, exactly. And like I said earlier, you know, the questions that the absurdist wanted their audiences to look at, those things that scare us all, especially the big scary death, right? You know, most people avoid it their whole lives, right? You don't want to think about it. You don't want to face it. You don't want to deal with it. You don't want to. And so, because people unfortunately have had to face that very, what's the right word?
Their own, I don't know what the word is. I don't know.
See how language is an ineffective means of communication?
It can
how
be
that
so
works?
Was I sleeping while others suffered? Am I sleeping now? Tomorrow, when I wake or think I do, what shall I say of today? That with Estragon, my friend, at this place until the fall of night, I waited for Godot?